Welcome to the Sleepy Bat. Tonight you're not a spectator in ancient Rome. You're the one holding the sword. You've just woken up as a gladiator trapped in the blood-soaked world of the Colosseum. No soft beds, no freedom, just chains, sand, and survival. So grab your pillow, find a quiet spot to rest, and let's travel back to a time when glory came at the edge of a blade. The first thing that hits you isn't the roar of the crowd or the glint of steel in afternoon sunlight. It's the smell. Imagine the most overwhelming combination of human sweat, blood that's been baking in Mediterranean heat, and the sharp metallic tang of iron mixed with sand that's never quite clean. That's what fills your nostrils as consciousness creeps back into your aching body. You're lying on what can barely be called a bed, more like a thin straw mattress thrown over wooden planks in a cell that's maybe 6 feet by 8 feet. The walls are rough stone, carved with desperate scratches left by previous occupants. Some are tallies marking days or fights survived. Others are prayers to gods who seem to have forgotten this place exists. A few are just names carved deep by men who knew they'd soon be forgotten and wanted to leave some proof they'd lived at all. Your body feels like it's been trampled by a herd of elephants, which, given your circumstances, might have literally happened during training yesterday. Every muscle screams in protest as you shift on the straw. Your hands are wrapped in strips of cloth stained brown with old blood. Some yours, some belonging to men who are no longer breathing. The calluses on your palms are thick as leather from gripping wooden training swords day after day, month after month. But here's what's truly unsettling about this moment of waking consciousness. You remember everything. You remember your life before this hell. Maybe you were a captured soldier from some distant province, dragged back to Rome in chains after your army was crushed. Maybe you were a criminal whose crimes were deemed entertaining enough for the arena. Or perhaps, and this might be the cruelest fate of all, you were a free man who sold himself into this life because debt or desperation left you no other choice. The morning light filters through a small barred window near the ceiling, casting long shadows across your cell in the Ludus, the gladiator school that's been your home for longer than you care to count. Outside, you can hear the sounds of Rome waking up. Cartwheels on stone, vendors calling out their wares, the distant murmur of free citizens going about their daily lives. Lives you'll never live again. Your stomach clenches with hunger, that constant companion of gladiator life. The lanista, your owner and trainer, feeds his human property just enough to keep you strong for the arena, but never enough to make you comfortable. Comfort makes men soft, and soft men die quickly when there's entertainment to provide. A key turns in your cell door with that distinctive scraping sound that's become the soundtrack to your existence. The guard who enters is a grizzled ex-gladiator himself, one of the lucky few who survived long enough to earn his freedom and now makes his living keeping current fighters in line. His scarred face shows no sympathy as he tosses a hunk of barley bread onto your straw mattress. Up, he grunts in accented Latin. Training starts at sunrise and the sun's already showing her face. You force yourself upright, every joint protesting the movement. The bread is hard as stone and tastes like sawdust, but it's fuel, and fuel is life in this place. You tear off pieces with your teeth, softening them with sips from a clay cup of watered-down wine that's more water than wine. This passes for breakfast in the ludus. As you eat, you can hear the sounds of other gladiators stirring in their cells. Someone is coughing, that wet, rattling cough that speaks of internal injuries that never quite heal. Another man is praying in a language you don't recognize, his voice rising and falling in desperate rhythm. Somewhere down the corridor, someone is sharpening a blade against stone, the rhythmic scraping echoing off the walls like a death song. Your feet find the cold stone floor and you begin the daily ritual of preparing your body for another day of learning how to kill and avoid being killed. You splash water from a small basin onto your face, washing away the sweat and grime of restless sleep. The water is lukewarm and slightly brackish, but it's clean enough to drink, and that's more luxury than many places in the Roman world can offer. Looking into the polished bronze mirror hanging on your cell wall, you barely recognize the face staring back. Your hair is cropped short, practical for combat. Scars map stories across your skin, each one a lesson learned in the hardest possible way. Your body has been transformed by months of brutal training into something more weapon than man. Muscles you never knew existed now stand out in sharp definition. Built through endless hours of lifting stones, swinging weighted wooden swords, and grappling with opponents who want to see you dead. But it's your eyes that have changed the most. They hold a hardness that wasn't there before, a calculating quality that comes from living every day knowing it might be your last. You've learned to read death in an opponent's stance, in the way they hold their weapon, in the subtle shift of their weight before they strike. This knowledge sits heavy behind your eyes like dark water in a deep well. The guard returns, this time carrying your training equipment. A wooden gladius, heavier than the real thing to build strength. Leather arm guards that offer some protection during practice but won't stop a determined blade. A small shield, again wooden, painted with the colors of your gladiator school. These tools have become extensions of your body as familiar as your own hands. Hurry up, the guard growls. The doctors are waiting and you know how they feel about tardiness. The doctors are the trainers, former gladiators themselves who survived long enough to pass on their deadly knowledge. They're hard men who've seen too much death to waste sentiment on current fighters. To them, you're an investment that needs to show returns in the arena. They'll push you to your limits and beyond, because a gladiator who can't endure the worst training won't survive when the games begin and real blood starts flowing. You follow the guard through the narrow corridors of the ludus, passing other cells where your fellow gladiators are going through their own morning preparations. Some nod as you pass, acknowledging the brotherhood of shared suffering. Others stare straight ahead, lost in their own private hells. A few are new arrivals, still soft from civilian life, their eyes wide with shock at their new reality. You remember having those eyes once. The corridor opens into the central courtyard of the ludus, and the morning sun hits your face with surprising warmth. For just a moment, you close your eyes and let yourself remember what it felt like to feel sunlight without thinking about death. But the moment passes quickly. Such luxuries are dangerous here. They make you forget where you are and what you need to do to survive another day. The training ground is a rectangle of sand surrounded by stone walls topped with iron spikes. No gladiator has ever escaped from a properly run ludus, and yours is run by a lanista who takes pride in his security measures. The sand beneath your feet is raked smooth each morning, but you know that by evening it will be churned and stained dark with sweat and blood from the day's training. Other gladiators are already warming up, their movements precise and economical. There's Marcus, a Thracian who fights with a curved sword and small shield, his body covered in ritual scars from his homeland. There's Gaius, a former legionnaire who was captured during a border skirmish and now fights as a murmillo, with the heavy rectangular shield and straight sword of Rome's infantry. And there's Brutus, not his real name, but the one he's taken since arriving here, a massive Germanic tribesman who specializes in fighting with a net and trident as a retiarius. Each man represents a different fighting style, a different path through the deadly maze of arena combat. The crowds love variety in their entertainment, so the ludus trains gladiators in multiple disciplines. Some fight heavily armored with sword and shield. Others rely on speed and agility with minimal protection. A few specialize in exotic weapons or unusual fighting techniques designed to thrill the spectators who pay good money to watch men die creatively. You take your position in the training formation, wooden sword in hand, and wait for the doctors to begin the morning's instruction. The sun climbs higher, promising another day of brutal heat that will leave you drained and aching. But you're alive, and in the ludus, being alive at the end of the day counts as victory. The head trainer, a scarred veteran named Lucius, who supposedly killed 17 men in the arena before earning his freedom, steps forward. His voice carries easily across the courtyard, trained from years of shouting instructions over the clash of weapons and the cries of wounded men. "Today we work on distance and timing," he announces. "Half of you will be dead within a month because you don't understand these concepts. The crowd doesn't care about your individual stories or your families back home. They want to see skill, courage, and blood. Give them all three and you might live to see another sunrise." And with that cheerful encouragement, your training day begins. But this is just the start of understanding what it truly means to be a gladiator in ancient Rome. The real education is yet to come. The wooden sword feels heavier than usual in your grip as you face your training partner across the sand. His name is Quintus, a former baker from Gaul who made the mistake of insulting a Roman magistrate after too much wine. Now he's learning that kneading dough and deflecting a blade require very different sets of skills. The sweat is already beading on his forehead, and the morning has barely begun. Lucius circles you both like a predator studying prey. "Fighting isn't about strength," he barks, his voice cutting through the humid air. "Any fool with muscles can swing a sword. Fighting is about reading your opponent's intentions before he knows them himself. Watch his feet, not his weapon. The feet tell the truth." You shift your stance, feeling the sand give slightly beneath your worn leather sandals. The grains are coarse and hot already, and you know that by midday they'll be scorching enough to burn exposed skin. But gladiators learn to fight in all conditions. The arena doesn't pause for comfort. Quintus lunges forward with his wooden gladius, a clumsy overhand strike that telegraphs his intention from 3 heartbeats away. You sidestep easily, bringing your own practice sword around to tap his ribs where his armor would end. In a real fight, he'd be spilling his life onto the sand right now. Dead, Lucius announces with satisfaction. Quintus, you're thinking like a baker, not a killer. In the arena, hesitation is death. Telegraphing your moves is death. Fighting angry is death. Again, this ritual repeats dozens of times as the sun climbs higher and the heat becomes oppressive. Your tunic clings to your skin, soaked through with perspiration that stings the cuts and scrapes you've accumulated over months of training. The salt burns, but you've learned to ignore pain. Pain is just information, and information keeps you alive. Between sword work, you practice with different weapons. The trident feels awkward in your hands compared to the familiar weight of a gladius, but versatility means survival. Some days you might face a heavily armored secutor with his curved rectangular shield and stabbing sword. Other days it could be a swift-footed retiarius who'll try to tangle you in his net before finishing you with 3 prongs of sharpened steel. The lanista appears at the edge of the training ground around mid-morning, his expensive toga a stark contrast to the sweat-stained tunics of his property. Yes, property. That's what you are now, legally speaking, a thing to be bought, sold, trained, and ultimately expended for profit. He watches the training with the calculating eye of a merchant evaluating livestock, making notes on a wax tablet about which gladiators show promise and which might need additional motivation. His gaze lingers on you for a long moment, and you feel that familiar chill that comes with being assessed by someone who holds your life in his soft, perfumed hands. The lanista invested good money in acquiring you, feeding you, housing you, and training you. Now he expects returns on that investment, measured in crowd applause and betting receipts from the games. You, he calls, pointing directly at you, come here. Your stomach drops. Individual attention from the lanista is rarely good news. You set down your practice weapons and cross the sand, very aware that every other gladiator is watching. In a place where solidarity is often the only comfort available, being singled out creates dangerous isolation. Next week's games, the lanista says without preamble, his voice cultured and smooth in the way that comes from a lifetime of never needing to raise it to be obeyed. You'll be fighting. 3rd bout of the afternoon against a volunteer from the crowd. Some young nobleman who thinks gladiator training is a fashionable hobby. Your blood goes cold. Fighting other gladiators in training is one thing. You're all trying to survive, so there's an unspoken agreement to inflict damage without permanent maiming when possible. But a volunteer, especially a wealthy one looking to prove his courage to friends and potential marriage prospects, that's different. They fight to kill because backing down would mean social death among their peers, which they consider worse than actual death. He's been training at a private gymnasium, the lanista continues, studying your reaction. Good equipment, professional instruction, all the advantages money can buy. But he's never felt real steel part his flesh or watched his blood darken the sand. You have. Use that. The dismissal is clear, and you return to training with a weight in your chest that has nothing to do with the oppressive heat. 1 week. 7 days to prepare for a fight that will either see you victorious and alive or entertaining the crowd with your death throes. There's no middle ground in the arena. The rest of the morning passes in a blur of repetitive sword work, footwork drills, and conditioning exercises designed to push your body beyond its normal limits. You practice the classic gladiator combinations: thrust, parry, riposte, shield bash, followed by a quick stab under the opponent's guard. The spinning attack that looks flashy for the crowd but leaves you vulnerable if it fails to connect. Lunch is a brief affair of barley porridge, diluted wine, and whatever vegetables the Ludus kitchen could acquire cheaply that morning. The gladiators eat in silence, each man lost in his own thoughts and fears. Conversation during meals tends toward the practical. Which trainer is in a particularly foul mood? Which gladiators are showing signs of serious injury? Who received word from family members they'll probably never see again? The afternoon training focuses on specific combat scenarios. You're paired with different opponents, each representing a different fighting style you might face in the arena. Against the heavily armored Murmillo, you practice mobility and endurance, wearing down his defenses while avoiding his powerful but slow attacks. Against the net-wielding Retiarius, you work on closing distance quickly before he can entangle your weapons and leave you helpless. But it's the psychological training that proves most challenging. Lucius makes you fight while spectators, other gladiators not currently training, shout insults and demands for blood. The noise is overwhelming at first, but you gradually learn to filter out the crowd and focus on the deadly dance of combat. In the real arena, 40,000 voices will be screaming for entertainment, and you can't let their bloodlust distract you from staying alive. The crowd is not your friend, Lucius reminds you as you catch your breath between bouts. They're not your enemy either. They're simply hungry and you're the meal. Give them what they want: a good show, courage under pressure, skill with weapons, and they might decide they want you to live. Disappoint them, show cowardice or weakness, and they'll demand your death as enthusiastically as they'd order wine at a feast. Late afternoon brings weapons maintenance, a crucial skill that many new gladiators underestimate. Your life depends on your equipment functioning perfectly when needed. So you learn to inspect every strap, every joint, every edge for signs of wear or damage. A shield grip that fails at the wrong moment means death. A sword that breaks on an opponent's armor means death. Even something as simple as a sandal strap that snaps during a fight can provide the fatal distraction that ends your story. You sit in the shade of the Ludus walls, carefully cleaning and oiling your practice weapons while around you other gladiators perform the same ritual. The repetitive motions are almost meditative, a brief respite from the day's violence. Some men hum while they work, old songs from their homelands that remind them of lives they'll never return to. Others maintain the silence that's become their default response to a world that's taken everything from them. The evening meal is marginally better than lunch, featuring actual meat along with the usual grain-based fare. The lanista knows that gladiators need protein to build and maintain the muscle mass required for arena combat, so the diet includes beef, pork and occasionally fish when the price is right. It's not fine dining by any stretch, but it's adequate fuel for bodies that are pushed to their limits daily. After eating, there's a brief period of free time before the cells are locked for the night. Some gladiators use this time for additional weapons practice, working through combinations and techniques they feel need improvement. Others gather in small groups to share stories, though talk of life before the ludus is generally avoided. It's too painful, and dwelling on what's lost serves no purpose when survival requires complete focus on the present. A few men write letters to family members, though whether these messages ever reach their intended recipients is questionable. The lanista controls all communication with the outside world, and he has little incentive to facilitate connections that might make his gladiators less focused on their deadly profession. Still, the act of writing seems to provide some comfort, even if the letters end up burned rather than delivered. You spend your free time studying the other gladiators, analyzing their fighting styles and identifying weaknesses you might exploit if forced to face them in the arena. It's a morbid necessity in a world where today's training partner might be tomorrow's opponent. Friendship is a luxury that can become a fatal distraction when the crowd demands blood and only one fighter can leave the sand alive. As darkness falls over the ludus, the guards begin the nightly ritual of securing the facility. Cell doors are locked, weapons are stored in the armory, and the night watch takes their positions. The sounds of the day fade into the quieter rhythms of evening. Distant conversations in various languages, the occasional cough or groan from someone nursing an injury, and the ever-present scurrying of rats that share the gladiators' quarters. You lie on your straw mattress, staring up at the small window that provides your only view of the free world beyond these walls. Through the bars, you can see a handful of stars struggling to shine through the smoke and haze that perpetually hangs over Rome. Those same stars once guided you home from fields or workshops or battlefields back when you had a home to return to. Sleep comes fitfully, interrupted by dreams that blend memory with nightmare. You relive the moment of your capture or conviction, the chain-rattling journey to Rome, the first terrifying days in the ludus when everything was unfamiliar and threatening. Sometimes you dream of the arena, of crowds screaming for your blood while you face opponents whose faces shift and change like smoke. But tonight, as your consciousness fades into the darkness, there's a new element in your dreams. The face of the young nobleman you'll fight in 6 days. You've never seen him, but your sleeping mind conjures an image anyway. Soft features unmarked by combat, eyes that have never seen real violence, hands that have never killed. He'll be brave enough. These volunteer fighters usually are, but bravery without experience is just another path to the grave. And somewhere in the depths of uneasy sleep, you begin planning how to put him there. Morning arrives not with gentle birdsong, but with the harsh clang of bronze against bronze as guards bang their weapons against cell doors. The sound reverberates through the stone corridors like thunder, dragging you from whatever brief escape sleep might have provided. Your body protests as you sit up, muscles stiff from another night on straw that's been compressed into something resembling stone. The reality of your situation crashes over you like cold water. 6 days. 6 days until you face steel meant to end your life, wielded by hands that have never trembled with genuine fear. You've survived this long by treating each day as both a gift and a sentence. But now time has taken on a different weight. Each sunrise brings you closer to an afternoon when you'll either walk out of the arena or be dragged out in pieces. The guard who unlocks your cell is different today, younger, with nervous eyes that dart away from direct contact. New guards always struggle with the reality of what this place represents. They see men who laugh, who bleed, who fear death just like anyone else, and it conflicts with the comfortable fiction that gladiators are somehow different from regular people, less human, more expendable. Your morning bread is stale as always, but you chew it methodically, focusing on the mechanical process of converting food to energy. Every calorie matters now. Your body is a weapon that requires fuel, maintenance, and careful preparation. The watered wine tastes of vinegar and neglect, but it's liquid and dehydration kills faster than most swords. As you eat, you study your hands. The calluses tell stories of thousands of hours gripping wooden practice swords, of shields that bit into your palms during extended defensive drills, of climbing ropes and lifting stones until your muscles screamed for mercy. These hands have learned to kill, though you try not to think too deeply about the men who've died beneath them. That way lies madness, and madness is another luxury you can't afford. The walk to the training ground feels different this morning. Your fellow gladiators move with the familiar shuffle of men conserving energy for the battles ahead. But there's something in the air, a tension that speaks of upcoming games. Word travels fast in the ludus, passed in whispered conversations and meaningful glances. Everyone knows that some of them won't survive the week. The training ground is already hot despite the early hour, the sand radiating warmth stored from yesterday's brutal sun. You take your position in the formation, wooden gladius familiar in your grip, and wait for instruction. But today's training begins differently. Lucius stands before the assembled gladiators with a scroll in his hand, his scarred face grave. The games next week will feature 12 separate bouts, he announces, his voice carrying clearly across the courtyard. Some of you will fight criminals condemned to death, easy work, if you stay focused. Others will face fellow gladiators from rival schools, harder but predictable. He pauses, letting his gaze sweep across the group. And some of you will fight volunteers. Rich men's sons playing at being warriors, these are the most dangerous opponents you'll ever face. Not because they're skilled, but because they have nothing to lose and everything to prove. Your throat tightens. He's talking about your fight, though he doesn't single you out again. The message is clear enough. Volunteers fight with the desperation of men whose social standing depends on displaying courage, even unto death. They can't retreat, can't yield, can't show weakness without losing everything that makes their lives worth living. That makes them unpredictable and therefore deadly. Training begins with weapons inspection, a ritual that's taken on new significance now that real combat looms. You examine every inch of your practice sword, checking for cracks or splinters that might indicate weakness in the wood. The balance feels right in your hand, the weight distributed properly along the blade. Tomorrow you'll be issued real steel, sharpened to a razor edge and weighted for killing rather than instruction. The morning's first drill involves fighting while blindfolded, forcing you to rely on hearing and instinct rather than sight. It's a cruel exercise that simulates the disorientation that can occur during actual combat when blood gets in your eyes or the crowd noise becomes overwhelming. You stumble at first, your wooden sword meeting empty air as your opponent circles you like a predator. But gradually your other senses compensate. You hear the soft whisper of his feet in the sand, the slight intake of breath before he attacks, the subtle shift in air pressure as his weapon moves toward you. When you finally connect, feeling your blade tap against his ribs, the satisfaction is profound. You're learning to fight like a wild animal, using instincts that civilization normally suppresses. "Good," Lucius calls out as you remove the blindfold. In the arena, dust and sweat and blood will cloud your vision. Sand will get in your eyes. The sun will be in the wrong position. Learn to fight with more than just your sight, and you'll live longer than those who depend on perfect conditions. The next drill is even more brutal. Endurance fighting, where you face fresh opponents in sequence without rest. It's designed to simulate the exhaustion that sets in during longer arena contests, when your sword arm feels like lead and your legs shake with fatigue. By the third opponent, you're gasping for air that feels too thin to sustain life. By the fifth, you're operating on pure instinct and stubborn will. Your final opponent in the sequence is Marcus, the Thracian who survived 7 arena fights. He's fast and experienced, and he shows no mercy even in practice. His curved sword comes at you from unexpected angles, forcing you to adapt your defense on the fly. When he finally lands a solid hit against your ribs, the impact drives the air from your lungs and sends you to one knee. "You're dead," he says matter-of-factly, offering you a hand up. "But you lasted longer than most would." That's something. The compliment means more than it should. In a world where encouragement is rare and genuine friendship is dangerous, even small acknowledgments of skill feel precious. You clasp his forearm in the gladiator's grip, feeling the solid strength of another man who understands what it means to face death for entertainment. Midday brings a break from combat training, but not from work. The gladiators who aren't scheduled for immediate arena duty are put to maintenance tasks around the ludus. You find yourself assigned to weapons care, sitting in the shade of the armory while you oil leather straps and sharpen practice blades. The work is meditative in its repetition, giving your mind time to wander even as your hands stay busy. Around you, other gladiators perform similar tasks. Some maintain the training equipment, ensuring that shields are properly balanced and spear points are securely attached. Others work on the facility itself, repairing stone walls that have been damaged by weather or the occasional escape attempt. The irony isn't lost on you that you're helping to maintain the very prison that holds you, but rebellion is futile when the alternative is crucifixion. The conversation during these work periods tends to be practical rather than philosophical. Someone mentions that the sand in the training ground needs to be raked and possibly replaced. Another gladiator notes that the water in the drinking cistern is starting to taste stale and might need to be refreshed. These mundane concerns provide a strange comfort, proof that life continues even in the shadow of violent death. But underneath the practical chatter runs a current of darker knowledge. Everyone knows which gladiators are showing signs of serious injury that might affect their performance. Everyone has heard rumors about which lanista is having financial problems and might be forced to sell his fighters to recoup losses. Everyone understands that their lives hang by threads that can be cut at any moment by forces completely beyond their control. Afternoon training focuses on crowd management, a skill that many new gladiators don't understand until it's too late. Fighting in the arena isn't just about defeating your opponent. It's about entertaining 40,000 people who've paid good money to see spectacular violence. The crowd's mood can determine whether a defeated gladiator lives or dies. So learning to read and influence that mood becomes a matter of survival. Lucius arranges the gladiators not participating in the current drill around the training area, instructing them to act as a hostile crowd. They boo and hiss when you make defensive moves, cheer when you attack aggressively, and shout for blood when you have your opponent at a disadvantage. The noise is overwhelming at first, a wall of sound that makes it difficult to concentrate on the deadly dance of combat. The crowd wants to see courage, Lucius shouts over the artificial din. They want to see skill, but most of all they want to see you willing to die rather than show cowardice. Give them that and they'll love you. Disappoint them and they'll demand your death as entertainment. No, you learn to acknowledge the crowd without letting them distract you from the real threat in front of you. A raised sword after a successful combination, a defiant shout when you're driven back but not defeated. Small gestures that tell the spectators you're giving them everything they paid to see. It's acting in a way, but acting where a poor performance means death. The training becomes more intense as the afternoon progresses. You practice the ritual movements that begin and end each arena contest. The salute to the Emperor's box, where you'll declare your willingness to die for Rome's entertainment. The formal presentation of weapons for inspection. The moment when you'll face your opponent across the sand and know that only one of you will walk away. But it's the mock death scenes that prove most disturbing. Lucius makes you practice dying well, showing courage even in defeat, how to fall with dignity, how to present your throat for the killing blow without flinching. How to die in a way that honors your training and satisfies the crowd's bloodlust. The fact that you might need these skills in 5 days makes every rehearsal feel like prophecy. Evening comes with the blessed relief of cooler air, though the stone walls of the ludus continue to radiate heat stored from the day's brutal sun. The gladiators gather for their final meal and the conversation is more subdued than usual. Everyone is thinking about the upcoming games, calculating odds and considering strategies for fights that might never come. You sit with your usual group, men who've become as close to friends as this place allows. There's Gaius, the former legionnaire whose military training gives him an edge in formation fighting. Brutus, the Germanic giant whose reach with the trident makes him dangerous at distance. And Quintus, the former baker whose improvement over recent months has been remarkable to witness. The talk turns inevitably to fighting techniques and arena tactics. Someone mentions that the sand in the Colosseum drains better than in some of the smaller amphitheaters, meaning blood and other fluids don't create slippery patches that can cause fatal stumbles. Another gladiator notes that the afternoon sun will be coming from the west, creating shadows that might provide tactical advantages for fighters who position themselves correctly. These details matter more than they should. In a contest where death is the likely outcome for at least one participant, every small advantage becomes crucial. The angle of the light, the condition of the sand, the mood of the crowd, the quality of your equipment. All of these factors can determine whether you see another sunset or feed the appetite of Roman entertainment. As the evening progresses, you find yourself studying your fellow gladiators with new intensity. Not as friends or training partners, but as potential opponents. The games next week will feature contests between gladiators from different schools, and there's always the possibility that politics or betting interests could force you to fight someone you've shared meals with. It's a horrible calculus, but one that every gladiator learns to perform. The night watch begins their rounds as darkness settles over the ludus and you're locked into your cell once again. The familiar sounds of evening surround you. Whispered prayers in a dozen different languages. The soft sobbing of someone who still hasn't accepted what his life has become. The rustle of straw as men try to find comfortable positions on beds that were never designed for comfort. You lie on your back, staring up at the small window that frames a handful of stars. 5 days ago, those same stars looked down on you as just another gladiator marking time until death. Now they witness a man who knows exactly when his final test will come. The knowledge should be terrifying, but instead it brings a strange kind of peace. Uncertainty is its own torture, and at least now you know the shape of what's coming. Your mind drifts to the young nobleman you'll face. He's probably in his own bed right now. A real bed with soft mattresses and clean linens, surrounded by luxury you can barely remember. Maybe he's also staring at the stars, wondering if he has the courage to face real steel wielded by a man who's killed before. Maybe he's reconsidering the wisdom of volunteering for arena combat just to impress his peers. But probably not. Rich men's sons who volunteer for the games are usually driven by the kind of arrogance that comes from never having faced genuine consequences for their actions. He'll arrive at the arena confident in his expensive training and superior equipment, certain that his advantages will overcome your experience. That confidence might be the edge you need to survive. Sleep comes eventually, though it's haunted by dreams of sand and steel and the roar of crowds hungry for blood. Tomorrow will bring more training, more preparation, more time to ready yourself for a fight that will determine whether you live to see another week. But tonight, in the darkness of your cell, you allow yourself a moment of something that might be hope. After all, you've survived this long, and survival in the world of the gladiator is the closest thing to victory that most men ever achieve. The 4th day before your fight arrives with the same bronze clanging that marks every dawn in the ludus. But today carries a different weight. Your body knows somehow that time is running short. The ache in your muscles feels more pronounced, as if your flesh is already anticipating the punishment to come. You've learned to read these subtle signals over the months of captivity. Pain is just information, and right now that information is telling you that your body is preparing for something final. The bread tastes like ash this morning, though you force yourself to chew and swallow methodically. Nutrition is ammunition now, and you can't afford to let nerves rob you of the fuel you'll need. Around you, other gladiators go through their own morning rituals with the mechanical precision of men who've accepted that routine is the only control they have left in their lives. Your cellmate, a scarred Gaul named Brennus who's been scheduled for the same day's games, sits hunched over his own meager breakfast. He'll be fighting in the opening bout against a condemned criminal, what the Romans call a noxii. It should be an easy victory. Criminals aren't trained fighters, but nothing is guaranteed when steel meets flesh and crowd expectations demand blood. You ever wonder what it's like? Brennus asks quietly, his voice barely audible above the general morning noise. To wake up knowing you won't see another sunrise? The question hangs in the air between you like smoke from a funeral pyre. It's the kind of thought that every gladiator carries but few voice aloud. Speaking it makes it real in a way that silent fear doesn't. Every man dies, you reply, though the words feel hollow even as you speak them. At least we know when. Brennus nods slowly, but his eyes hold that distant look that comes when a man is seeing something beyond the stone walls that contain his body. Maybe he's remembering green fields in Gaul, or a woman's laugh, or the taste of ale that wasn't watered down to stretch the lanista's budget. These memories are both blessing and curse for gladiators. They provide escape from the present horror, but they also remind you of everything you've lost. The walk to the training ground feels different today. Other gladiators look at you with a mixture of respect and pity that's reserved for men marked for the arena. You've joined that special category of the condemned, those who've moved beyond hope into the realm of acceptance. There's a strange honor in it, though you doubt your younger self would have understood that honor. Lucius greets the morning formation with his usual scowl, but his eyes linger on you and the other gladiators scheduled for the upcoming games. His investment in your survival has shifted from long-term to immediate. You're no longer potential future earnings. You're current assets that need to perform well enough to maintain the Ludus's reputation and attract future betting interest. Today we work on finishing moves, he announces, his voice carrying the authority of a man who's killed more opponents than most gladiators face in their entire careers. Not the killing blow itself, that's just mechanics. I'm talking about the moment when your opponent realizes he's beaten, and you have to decide how to end his story. The training dummies are arranged in a circle around the courtyard, their leather-wrapped frames scarred from thousands of practice strikes. But today you're not fighting wood and straw. Today you're paired with other gladiators in controlled combat that mimics the real thing as closely as possible without actually ending lives. The wooden swords are replaced with blunted steel, heavy enough to bruise but not sharp enough to cut. Your first opponent is Demetrius, a Greek who fights as a Thrax with the distinctive curved sword and small round shield. He's quick and technical, the kind of fighter who wins through precision rather than brute force. The crowd loves his style because it looks effortless when he's winning, like a deadly dance performed for their entertainment. The moment Lucius signals the start, Demetrius comes at you with a flurry of attacks designed to test your defensive capabilities. His blade work is beautiful in its efficiency, each strike flowing naturally into the next, creating patterns that are both deadly and aesthetically pleasing. You give ground steadily, your shield absorbing impacts that would have shattered bone if delivered with sharpened steel. But beauty doesn't always translate to effectiveness. Demetrius's attacks are predictable in their perfection, following classical forms that you've learned to read over months of training. When he commits to a particularly elaborate combination, you step inside his guard and drive your pommel into his solar plexus. The impact doubles him over, gasping for air that won't come. "Good," Lucius calls out. But in the arena, you don't stop there. The crowd wants to see the moment of decision. Do you grant mercy? Do you make it quick? Do you draw it out for their entertainment? Show me. You stand over Demetrius as he struggles to breathe, your sword point hovering near his throat. In a real fight, this would be the moment when you look to the crowd, reading their mood, interpreting their gestures. Thumbs up might mean mercy, though the popular understanding of that gesture is exactly backwards from reality. Thumbs down could mean death, or it could mean drop your weapon. The crowd's will is expressed through a complex language of signals that can mean the difference between life and death for a defeated gladiator. But more important than the crowd's opinion is the emperor's will, if he's present. The games exist for his entertainment and political benefit, and his word overrides any number of spectator preferences. A gladiator who displeases the emperor might find himself facing increasingly dangerous opponents until someone finally manages to kill him. Politics and entertainment blend together in the arena in ways that make every fight a potential death sentence. You help Demetrius to his feet, noting the way he favors his left side where your pommel strike landed. In a real fight, that injury would be exploited ruthlessly until it became fatal. The human body has so many vulnerable points, so many ways to fail when pushed beyond its limits. Gladiators learn anatomy not from scrolls but from experience, cataloging the places where steel can find purchase in flesh and bone. The next drill involves multiple opponents, a scenario that sometimes occurs in the larger spectacles when the crowd demands extra entertainment. Fighting more than one enemy at a time requires different tactics entirely. You can't focus on defeating individual opponents. Instead, you must control distance and positioning to prevent them from coordinating their attacks. Two gladiators circle you in the sand, wooden clubs in their hands instead of swords. The weapons are different, but the principle remains the same. Keep moving. Never let them trap you between their positions. Strike quickly when opportunities present themselves. The sand shifts under your feet as you dance backwards, always keeping both opponents in your peripheral vision. The first attack comes from your left, a sweeping club strike aimed at your ribs. You duck under it and immediately pivot to face the second attacker, who's trying to close distance while you're supposedly distracted. Your own club catches him across the shoulder, sending him stumbling sideways into the path of his partner's follow-up attack. For a moment they're tangled together and you have the opening you need. Two quick strikes delivered with the precision that comes from endless practice, and both opponents are down in the sand. In a real arena, they'd be dead or dying, their blood seeping into the earth while the crowd roared its approval. Adequate, Lucius comments, though his tone suggests that adequate might not be good enough when real steel is involved. But you're still thinking like you're training. In the arena, there's no referee to stop the fight when someone gets hurt. You keep going until your opponents stop moving permanently. The morning progresses through increasingly complex scenarios. Fighting while injured, simulated by having weights attached to your sword arm to slow your reactions. Combat in different lighting conditions with cloth screens set up to cast shadows across the fighting area. Battle against opponents using unfamiliar weapons, forcing you to adapt your defensive strategies on the fly. Each drill is designed to prepare you for the chaos and unpredictability of actual arena combat. No fight goes exactly according to plan, and the gladiators who survive are those who can improvise when their carefully rehearsed techniques fail them. Flexibility of mind is as important as strength of arm when death is the consequence of failure. By midday, your body is screaming for rest, but the training continues. This close to the games, there's no time for recovery or gentle conditioning. You're being pushed to your absolute limits and then beyond, because the arena will demand everything you have and more. Better to discover your breaking point here in the relative safety of the ludus than in front of 40,000 spectators who've paid to see you die entertainingly. The afternoon brings weapons work with real steel, though still blunted for safety. The weight difference is immediately noticeable. Practice swords are made heavier than their combat equivalents to build strength. But real weapons have their own balance and feel that can't be perfectly replicated. You spend an hour just getting reacquainted with genuine gladius, learning how its lighter weight affects your timing and technique. Lucius watches your form with the critical eye of a man whose own survival once depended on perfect technique. Every movement is analyzed and corrected, every inefficiency eliminated. At this level, the difference between life and death might come down to a fraction of a second saved in recovery time or a single degree of angle that allows a blade to slide past armor instead of being deflected. Your footwork is still too wide, he observes, tapping your ankle with his training stick. In soft sand, those long steps will cost you balance. Keep your feet closer together. Stay on the balls of your feet. Think like a dancer, not a soldier. The comparison to dancing isn't accidental. Arena combat is as much performance as warfare, and the most successful gladiators understand that entertainment value affects their survival chances. A fighter who wins boringly might find himself scheduled against increasingly dangerous opponents until someone manages to kill him. But a gladiator who wins spectacularly, who gives the crowd moments of genuine excitement and fear, earns the kind of reputation that can extend his life significantly. You practice the theatrical elements alongside the practical ones. How to acknowledge the crowd without taking your attention off your opponent. How to make defensive moves look more active and engaging. How to time your attacks to coincide with moments when the maximum number of spectators will have a clear view of the action. It's a complex calculus that combines showmanship with survival instinct. The sun is starting its descent toward the western horizon when Lucius calls for a break in training. The gladiators gather in whatever shade they can find, sharing water that's been warmed by the heat but is still precious beyond measure. Dehydration kills faster than most weapons, and maintaining proper fluid levels is crucial for peak performance. You find yourself sitting beside Marcus, the Thracian veteran who survived more arena contests than any other gladiator in the Ludus. His body is a map of scars, each one telling the story of a fight that could have ended his life. Some are clean lines from sword cuts that missed vital organs by millimeters. Others are jagged tears from spear points or club strikes that should have been fatal but somehow weren't. Tomorrow they'll start the betting, Marcus says quietly, his eyes fixed on the sand between his feet. Word will spread through the taverns and bathhouses about who's fighting and what their chances are. Your name will be on the lips of men who've never held a sword, debating whether you're worth risking their coin on. The thought is simultaneously flattering and horrifying. Somewhere in Rome, people you've never met will be analyzing your fighting style, discussing your previous performances, calculating the odds of your survival. To them, you're not a person with hopes and fears and memories of a life before the Ludus. You're just another variable in their gambling equations. Does it bother you? You ask. Being entertainment for people who wouldn't last 5 minutes in here? Marcus considers the question while absently tracing one of his scars with a fingertip. Used to, he finally admits. But then I realized something. They need us more than we need them. Without gladiators, they're just soft civilians living boring lives and pretending their comfort makes them superior. We give them something to believe in even if they don't understand what it costs. His words carry the weight of hard-earned wisdom, the kind that only comes from staring death in the face repeatedly and somehow finding reasons to keep fighting. There's a philosophy that develops among long-term gladiators, a way of making meaning from circumstances that would drive most men to despair. The afternoon's final training exercise is the most psychologically challenging yet. Mock executions where condemned criminals are brought in to serve as practice opponents. These men are already dead legally. They've been sentenced to die in the arena for crimes against the state or particularly heinous murders. Your job is to kill them cleanly and efficiently, giving the crowd a good show while ending their lives with something approaching mercy. It's the closest thing to real combat you'll experience before the actual games, and the weight of that knowledge sits heavy in your chest as the first criminal is led out. He's younger than you expected, maybe 20 years old, with the lean build of someone who's been eating prison rations for months. His eyes hold the desperate hope of a man who still believes he might somehow survive this. Lucius hands you a sharpened gladius, its edge keen enough to slice through flesh and bone with minimal resistance. The weight feels different from the practice weapons, more substantial somehow, as if the steel itself understands its purpose. This blade was forged to end lives, and it's eager to fulfill that function. Make it clean, Lucius instructs. The crowd doesn't want to see butchery. They want to see skill, precision. A good death that honors both victor and victim. The criminal has been given a wooden sword and a small shield. Enough equipment to make the contest look fair without actually giving him any real chance of victory. He holds his weapons awkwardly, clearly untrained in their use. This isn't combat. It's execution with extra steps. When the signal comes, you move with the fluid precision that months of training have burned into your muscle memory. The criminal raises his shield defensively, but his stance is all wrong, his guard too high. Your first strike is a feint to his midsection that draws his shield down, exposing his neck. The second strike, delivered with surgical precision, opens his throat in a spray of arterial blood. He drops to his knees, hands clutching at the wound that's already too late to heal. His eyes meet yours for a moment, and in them you see not accusation but something like gratitude. Death in the arena is still death, but it's faster and cleaner than crucifixion or being thrown to wild beasts. You've given him that much mercy, at least. The body is dragged away by slaves whose job it is to clear the sand between contests, and you're left standing with blood on your sword and the taste of copper in the air. This is what awaits you in 3 days. The moment when steel parts flesh and life becomes death in the space between heartbeats. The only question is whether you'll be the one holding the sword or feeling its bite. Evening approaches with the promise of cooler air, though the stone walls of the ludus continue to radiate the day's accumulated heat. The gladiators are dismissed to their cells earlier than usual, a small mercy that allows time for rest and contemplation before the final days of preparation. Tomorrow will bring more intensive training, more preparation for the contests that will determine who lives and who dies for the entertainment of Rome. You lie on your straw mattress as darkness settles over the ludus, listening to the familiar sounds of evening. Somewhere in the distance, a gladiator is singing a song in a language you don't recognize, the melody haunting and beautiful despite the harsh acoustics of stone corridors. Others are praying to whatever gods they hope might intervene on their behalf, though experience suggests the gods have little interest in the fate of enslaved fighters. Your mind drifts to the young nobleman you'll face in 3 days. Right now, he's probably enjoying a fine dinner with friends, perhaps boasting about his upcoming arena appearance, accepting congratulations on his courage and volunteering for combat. He has no idea what it feels like to kill a man, to watch the light fade from someone's eyes and know that you're the cause. That innocence might be the advantage you need. Sleep comes eventually, though it's troubled by dreams of sand and steel and the sound of crowds baying for blood. In your dreams, you see faces of men you've killed in training, their eyes holding questions you can't answer. Why them and not you? What makes your life more valuable than theirs? What gives you the right to survive when others don't? But morning will come regardless of your dreams, and with it another day of preparation for the contest that will determine whether you see another sunset. 3 days, 3 more chances to perfect the skills that might keep you alive when entertainment becomes execution, and the crowd's pleasure depends on your pain. The countdown continues. measured not in hours but in heartbeats, each one bringing you closer to the moment when everything you've learned, everything you've become, will be tested against steel and the will to live. The arena waits, patient and hungry, ready to receive whatever sacrifice the games demand, and somewhere in the darkness of your cell, you close your eyes and try to find whatever peace is available to a man who knows exactly when he'll face his final test. The final morning arrives not with the usual bronze clanging, but with an almost reverent silence that seems to acknowledge what this day holds. Even the guards move more quietly, their footsteps muffled as if loud sounds might somehow accelerate time toward the inevitable. You've been awake for hours already, staring at the same patch of stone ceiling you've memorized over these months of captivity, watching the slow progression of pre-dawn light creep through your barred window. Your body feels different today, not weaker exactly, but somehow more present, as if every nerve ending has become hyper-aware of its own existence. The rough texture of your straw mattress, the weight of the thin blanket across your chest, the cool morning air against your skin. Everything carries an intensity that wasn't there yesterday. This is what it means to be truly alive, you realize. To know that death is not some distant possibility but a specific appointment scheduled for this afternoon. The bread they bring tastes no different than usual, but you chew each bite with deliberate attention, as if memorizing the experience of eating. Around you, the other gladiators scheduled for today's games go through their own rituals of preparation. Some pray loudly to gods who've shown little interest in gladiator welfare. Others sit in complete silence, perhaps trying to preserve whatever peace they can before the chaos begins. Brennus, your cellmate who'll fight in the opening bout, has been awake all night. You've listened to him shift and turn on his mattress, occasionally muttering phrases in his native Gaulish that sound like either prayers or curses. Now he sits hunched over his morning meal, his hands trembling slightly as he brings the bread to his mouth. The condemned criminal he's scheduled to face should be easy prey, but nothing is guaranteed when steel meets flesh, and crowd expectations demand entertainment. The walk to the training ground feels like a funeral procession. Other gladiators who aren't fighting today watch you pass with expressions that mix respect with relief. They understand that today's fighters are crossing a threshold that separates the living from the soon-to-be dead, and there's a terrible honor in that crossing that demands acknowledgement. Boom. But today's training is different. Instead of the usual brutal conditioning and weapons work, Lucius has arranged what he calls a cleansing ritual. Light exercises designed to keep your muscles loose without exhausting your body before the real contest begins. You move through familiar forms with wooden weapons, but the movements feel ceremonial now, like a dancer performing sacred choreography. The massage that follows is administered by a skilled slave who works the tension from your shoulders and back with practiced efficiency. His hands find knots of stress you didn't know existed, kneading them until your muscles feel fluid and responsive. This luxury, normally reserved for the Lanista's most valuable fighters, is an investment in today's performance. A gladiator who dies spectacularly reflects well on his school and attracts future betting interest. Your real weapons are presented with the solemnity usually reserved for religious ceremonies. The gladius has been sharpened to perfection, its edge keen enough to slice through silk dropped across the blade. The balance is flawless, the grip wrapped in fresh leather that won't slip when wet with sweat or blood. Your shield bears the fresh paint of your school's colors, and the bronze reinforcements gleam like mirrors in the morning light. The armor fitting takes longer than usual, with every strap and buckle checked multiple times to ensure nothing will fail at a crucial moment. The bronze greaves that protect your shins are polished to a brilliant shine that will catch the afternoon light and please the crowd. Your helmet, when they place it on your head for the final fitting, transforms you from a man into something else entirely. A creature of war and entertainment designed to kill or die for Roman pleasure. As the sun climbs higher, other gladiators from rival schools begin arriving for the day's contests. You watch them through the barred windows of the ludus, noting their equipment and trying to assess their skill levels from their bearing and movement. These men represent different training philosophies, different approaches to the deadly art of arena combat, and studying them might provide insights useful for future fights, assuming you survive to have future fights. The crowd noise begins early, a distant rumble that grows steadily louder as more spectators file into the amphitheater. By midday, the sound has become a constant background roar, punctuated by periodic cheers as preliminary entertainments begin. Criminals are being executed by wild beasts, providing the crowd with warm-up bloodshed before the main gladiatorial contests begin. Your final meal is served on actual plates rather than the usual wooden bowls, another small luxury meant to honor men about to risk their lives for entertainment. The food is better too: fresh bread, roasted meat, wine that hasn't been watered down to nothing. You eat slowly, savoring flavors that might be the last you ever experience, while around you other gladiators do the same with the quiet intensity of men performing their final earthly acts. The waiting becomes almost unbearable as afternoon approaches. You've done everything possible to prepare. Your weapons are perfect, your body is ready, your mind has accepted what's coming. But time moves with cruel slowness, each minute stretching like hours as anticipation builds toward the moment when you'll walk through the gates and onto the sand where men die for applause. Lucius appears one final time, his scarred face serious as he looks over the gladiators scheduled for the day's final contests. His investment in your survival has reached its conclusion. Everything he could teach you has been taught. Every advantage he could provide has been provided. Now your fate rests in your own hands and the whims of fortune. Remember, he says quietly, his voice carrying the weight of years spent training men to kill and die. The crowd wants to see courage above all else. Skill matters, but courage is what they'll remember. Give them that, and they might decide you deserve to live another day. The sound of bronze horns echoes across the ludus, the signal that the main gladiatorial contests are about to begin. Your time has come. Guards appear to escort the scheduled fighters to the amphitheater, their faces professionally neutral as they prepare to deliver human merchandise to the arena's hungry maw. You rise from your final meal and gather your weapons, feeling their familiar weight one last time before the contest that will determine everything. The other gladiators nod as you pass, offering the silent solidarity of men who understand exactly what you're walking toward. There are no words adequate for this moment, no speeches that can encompass the magnitude of what's about to unfold. The tunnel leading from the ludus to the amphitheater stretches ahead like a throat waiting to swallow you. Each step brings you closer to the moment when you'll emerge into blazing sunlight and the roar of 40,000 voices, all of them eager to see you bleed and possibly die for their entertainment. But you walk forward anyway because this is what you've become. A gladiator, a man who faces death with steel in his hand and whatever courage he can muster. The arena waits, patient and eternal, ready to receive whatever sacrifice the afternoon demands. And you, weapon of Rome's entertainment, trained killer and condemned man, walk toward that sand-covered stage where stories end and legends sometimes begin. The crowd's roar grows louder with each step, until it becomes a physical force that seems to vibrate in your bones. This is it. This is what it means to be a gladiator in ancient Rome, to walk willingly toward death for the pleasure of people who will forget your name before they finish their evening meal. But you walk anyway because courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite that fear, carrying yourself with dignity even when dignity seems impossible. The arena sand awaits, and somewhere in that blazing amphitheater a young nobleman prepares to discover what it really means to face a man who has nothing left to lose. The gates loom ahead, and beyond them lies whatever fate the gods and the crowd have prepared. You grip your gladius a little tighter and step into the light, ready to discover whether this story ends in triumph or tragedy, but determined that it will end with honor intact. This is what you've become. This is who you are. A gladiator of Rome, walking toward immortality or oblivion with equal courage, carrying the hopes and fears of every slave who ever dreamed of freedom into the blazing heart of the empire's cruelest entertainment. The sand awaits, and with it your final test.